So, Chris, welcome back
Thank you.
to the show. And this is Leadership Conversations. We're talking about church planning specifically. Dr. William Clark here with Chris Skowronek. Did I say it right? I said it wrong again?
Skowronek. No, it's
Skowronek.
good. Yeah.
It's the second time in a row. I just call you Chris. So, I wanted to pick up something you said in the last episode with us. In that, there are a bunch of things you said. Um, Let me start here. You said planting as a team is desired and preferred. Totally agree with you. That's not the case for everybody.
No.
And I'm gonna give you my situation, and I'd love to just for you to react. I believe in teams in every scenario, professionally, personally. Just teams are it. When I moved here, there was no team moving with me.
Yeah.
And that is a scenario for a number of planters who are just moving here with their wife and their kids. That is their team,
Yeah.
if they at all, right? Because even in that case, the planter's wife is not necessarily fully functional because she's in a situation where she's probably in a new state, new city. She doesn't know anyone, doesn't trust anyone with her children. Kids are small, and moms of small kids are just mama bears, right? Which is a good and a bad thing, right? So then really that leaves the planter alone. Then in the new town where you don't know anyone, and let's talk about Connecticut, what I learned is that people who show interest aren't really committed.
Right.
And the people you find along your journey who are just, they get it, they're believers, they understand it, they're committed to their own home church, which means that they're not leaving their church. And if they
Right.
do leave their home church, you have to have a service at an odd time of the day that allows them to, if they have the energy, to volunteer with you,
Right.
which gives the perception of a team. So that's a difficult sell to make to planters coming to New England saying, you need to have a team, which again, I think we're saying it's the smartest thing to do. But the question, Chris, is talk to the planter who's coming from elsewhere, who's moving heaven and earth to move here and does not have a team. What strategies have you seen that has worked for other planters that makes sense around launching without a team or how to build a team?
Yeah. I think you need to find a way to build the team. You need to you need to come out knowing that you can't do it totally by yourself.
Right.
You're going to have to work at finding people that will come along with you. And so the key is you have to be clear on your vision, clear on what God's called you to do. You don't have to have it all spelled out, but you got to be clear and be able to articulate it in a way that seems intelligent, that you can, kind of quickly sketch it out on a napkin for somebody. And you just have to cast that net as many times as you possibly can with people, why you're here, what God's called you to do, and just pray. Pray that God will bring one or two or three families that will come alongside you. Because really, the stronger your kind of core team really is. And the scary thing about core teams is a lot of people who are on your core team will not be with you in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But they will be with you in the beginning. And I think I read Steve Sjogren, who's a vineyard pastor, talk about, and maybe this is an unfair thing, but I think it's true. People can be like scaffolding. When you build a building, there's a lot of
Yes,
scaffolding, and
yes.
they're there, and they're critical to getting that building built.
Yep.
But at some point, they're going to be taken down, and that building's going to continue on with its function.
Yeah.
And so you'll have people that'll be super excited about starting something new, but they're going to want to start something new again. And at some point, you're no longer new, and they're going to move on.
Yeah.
And then some people are just, they'll connect so much with you, they'll want to stay with you.
And let's be clear that's with any business.
Yeah, oh yeah. That's
It's
within
not
the
just a
business.
church. It's just any business.
Yeah, yep. And then, so and then being able to sell what you're doing to, I hesitate to say sell, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You have to make the case for what you're doing in other churches. Hopefully you can find other churches that will be friendly to what you're doing. It won't feel as though you're trying to compete with them.
Right.
And so they'll take that, they call it the NIMBY principle, not in my backyard.
Oh, that's so New England. Oh, that's so New England, man.
And so because there aren't a lot of churches and because it feels like you can't afford to lose anybody with so many churches. So if you plant a church, in the next town, most churches feel like you're just way too close. It's way too close.
Mind you, this is not a mega metropolis. This
No,
is
it
like,
not, yeah.
it's like the country.
Yeah. But you have, when we started in Wethersfield, so when we reopened in Wethersfield, new name, new vision, new everything, one of the first things we did, because this is 2006, so Facebook was, I don't even know if it was up and running yet. And so we had to do a mailer because that's what was, the only thing we could really use at the time were mailers, word of mouth. We could do radio ads, maybe TV ads, but all that stuff is expensive. And so we did a big mailer to the town and we tried to just present ourselves as something new. And that immediately got me an angry phone call from a local pastor
Oh, God.
saying, "Who do you think you are?"
So New England.
And he left me a voicemail, so I could re-listen to it a few times and just get myself upset about it. But what I tried to tell him was, we're in a community. So the town, if we just look at just the town was 26,000 people. They had somewhere around 700 or 800 people that attended their church. There's like maybe 8 churches in town. So when you look at the evangelical church, the gospel churches in town, I couldn't come up with, when I asked their average attendance, with more than 1,400 people total going to church at their churches on any given Sunday morning, and in a town of 26,000 people. And so I said to him, there are so many people to reach. I don't want people from your church who are unhappy coming to me.
Yeah.
I don't want your people to come to our church. We're looking for the people who don't go to church.
Right.
Who have given up on church. This is what the mailer we did. Have you given up on church, but not on God or not on faith? And so those are the people we were trying to say, yeah, we're new. So what are we going to say? We're old? And it's hard to, they've been around for a long time. So I think sometimes we even had a church in their monthly newsletter. The pastor wrote his front page little article for the month that not all things new are good. And he spoke specifically about us. And so it was kind of the church that was fighting us in addition to all the other things you face.
I love New England.
And so it's just interesting. There's definitely a threat because the churches have been around for a while. Some churches are doing well, but a lot of churches are kind of struggling.
Yeah.
And so you come in and people feel like you're a threat. And so what you want to do is partner with them. I remember the first church planter that came in to the community, and he wrote all the pastors a letter because I got one, and we had already been in the planting process. And he was like, "I'm here to reach this community for Christ. Come join me." I remember when I read that, I thought, "Come join me. Why don't you join us?"
So you switched roles and became the...
He became the one who was in charge of the town, and I thought that was a fun. I'm sure he didn't mean it that way, but that's the way I read it. And I had to fight with that, being like, "Who do you think you are?" But so you really you have to come out here as a church planter, and knowing that you're going to take a job, knowing that you need to use that job, you need to leverage it for the gospel, no matter what. And people in New England are. I've heard it said that people in New England, we all have 2 walls that separate us and other people. And so, and I think this is true. I've kind of seen it in my travels down south. So the first wall you encounter if you visit people, if you talk to someone down south you don't know, the first wall is low. So people make you feel very friendly.
Oh, yes.
And so you think, as a New Englander, we all think, well, they love me and we're good friends. But there's a second wall that's very high.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's not till you cross that wall do you become part of their inner circle.
Yes.
But up north here in New England, the first wall is really high.
Oh, yes.
And it takes a long time to get over that first wall.
Years.
But once you do, then you can get to
Yeah.
the inner core quicker.
And I think part of it is getting over the wall,
Yeah.
and then while, keyword process, you planters out there who are coming over here, the process getting over the wall,
Yeah.
you learn how to adapt, which is equally important as getting over the wall here.
Yep. I tell people when I started in ministry, now I'm from here, but I wasn't like networked into any of these groups like Rotary Club or any of these other groups. And so I was involved in one of these organizations, and they met every week 52 weeks a year for lunch. So we network. It's a business organization. So we met every week. I paid my $10. And it was 3 years, almost to the day, before somebody knocked on my office door and said, "Can you help me? I've got an issue." 3 years. And I was from here. That still shocked me.
Yeah.
And I think, that's one of the realities of here. And then now I've been a friend with that person 17 years, 18 years now. But it took 3 years for them to trust me enough.
That sounds about right. I mean, and I think, man, for anybody moving to New England professionally or in the world of the kingdom world here, I found that to be true in all the worlds that exist here. That it has taken years for people professionally to trust me, years to be trusted in the kingdom by other kingdom leaders, etc. Man, it's an investment. Now, I'll tell you the rumor about New England that I found to be true too, and that is, when I first moved here, it was said to me, New England is a place where ministries and dreams come to die. And what that means is, if you're not from here and you think you're going to come save the world, you will get shut down really, really quick and excluded. And you can easily feel like you've lost your purpose and value in God, because that wall is super high. And all your dreams, all your ministry expectations, they get buried here, and you go back to where you came from. And New England will continue as business as usual. And I've heard that, I've seen it. And for me, Chris, I think what has kept me here has been just knowing years ago I was called to New England way before I moved here. So all of the stuff I've had to put up with, it was almost a badge of honor to say, I'm going to stay, or I'm not intimidated, or to call it out, say it, point it out, identify it, label it, and still want to be here to change it for someone else who's new. And then you start to find that there are a lot of transplants here who can't figure it out either.
Oh, yeah.
But they're here. They've been here 10, 15, 20 years, and they're like, and those are the nice people because they're not from here. Which is like, but it's true. It's a thing here, man. It's a thing.
It's true, because if people here are suspicious of new things. That's just a New England thing, and you got to get used to it.
Yeah.
And so even if it's kind of a proven thing, there's still a sense of like, you won't be here for long.
Yes.
So
yes.
That's definitely perspective.
Yeah.
And so I remember in not far from where we are now, Krispy Kreme opened. Probably, when did Krispy Kreme open? Maybe 12 or 13 years ago. And so everybody was excited. Krispy Kreme was coming to Connecticut. And they were open, and they built this building, so there was 6 months of
Where was
everybody
this?
right in Newington.
Oh.
Yep, right near West. I can say it's right near Bertucci's.
Oh.
So they opened. They built this building on this strategic corner right on a main road. And so when they opened, people came from everywhere. I mean, there was police directing traffic. I mean, it was just out of control. I mean, it brought that community to its knees. But part of the contract that they signed when they moved in was they would not make donuts and then sell them elsewhere. It was going to be just that for that store right there. Well, they don't function that way. I mean, there's no Krispy Kreme in the area. So if they can make donuts and they can put them in a truck and they can deliver them to other places, that's what they'll do. And so they took over the world for about 3 months. And so everybody was talking about Krispy Kreme. And then the town got wind of the fact that and people were complaining in the neighborhood that the trucks come in at 3 o'clock in the morning and they load up the trucks and they make a lot of noise. And I don't know if they stayed a year and they shut down and they closed. I'm like, Krispy Kreme.
So New England, man. So New England.
So, but that's very typical.
Yes.
Yeah, very typical. So we just, so a church planter will, and this is what I found pretty consistently. So the people you will probably connect with first are people not from here. They've moved here, but they can't find what they had when they left or from where they left. It's much harder to reach people from New England. And so the church that I took this small group over from, most people who were in that original church with the first church planter were not from here. And so just about everybody, there were very few families that were from. And so when he left, they left. you know, they didn't stay. And so it's just a piece of the puzzle.
Man,
Reaching New
but
England.
this goes back to the question about teams. I found, given my experience and what you described, which I've seen too, that planters need to be open-minded about matrix teams. Okay. Now are you familiar with the term?
No, go ahead.
So that term comes from my IT background. And matrix teams are teams that are not dedicated, but are allocated to you based upon a need in the moment. So in the IT world, the only static members of a team would be primarily the project manager. Everybody else was not expendable, but just allocated. Your business analyst, your data architect, your coder and developer, and your quality assurance person. And on a project, Chris would be assigned to me for 3/4 of his time, or Joe would be assigned to me for 2/10 of his time. Like, you get allocated by projects. It doesn't, stop the project from being done, but you have to be efficient and effective in managing, making sure you don't waste Chris' time, because Chris has to leave in 3.5 months to go work on the next project because his discipline is needed elsewhere. So strategically, I found that to be helpful. That there is a downside. There is no dedication or loyalty because of the makeup of that team, because people have to roll off. Given the context of church and ministry, the high wall of acceptance here, I found you have to be comfortable with the matrix design that will inevitably creep into your organization. And I think planters, especially those fresh out of seminary or in seminary and learning about Bible stuff and going to come out and preach the hell out of you, right? They're not learning leadership stuff.
Right.
This is a leadership conversation,
Right.
and how to acquire and deploy teams, and to be secure enough when people roll off or people they finish their season with you, is a skill. It's a discipline that isn't talked about at all in seminary, let alone in other circles. But in places like NAM, the CPN network, it's talked about. I mean, are there other strategies you've seen besides the matrix team and the dedicated core team that has worked for planters that other planters should consider as they're moving here?
I think the other strategy is, if you can ideally have a partner church, sending church that's nearby, that will be willing to kind of function maybe in that matrix way, where they can help you and support you as you get started, so that you're not spending all of your time that you need to be spending, because you really need to spend it. And somebody told me this when I first started, amazingly helpful. He said, just remember that preaching is 10% of what you need to do as a church planter.
Wow.
Get that into your head. Now that's not, I'm not saying I necessarily agreed with that,
Right.
or that's how I allocated my time.
Right.
But that was helpful for me to keep telling myself that every time I was tempted to spend 3 or 4 days to make the perfect sermon.
Wow.
For the 40 people that show up on Sundays, because then you forget about, in my case, the other 25,000 almost 26,000 people that are not in church. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
remembering that a bulk of my time needs to be, how do I connect with those people? And things I did, which I know we don't do anymore, but I still think you ought to do it. And I think God blesses us when we put time and energy into outreach, whether we do it well or whether we do I just think whatever kinds of activities we do, God, I've seen this time and time again in my own ministry, God will bless it.
Yes.
And so,
Yep.
As crazy as it was, I had a friend tell me, what you need to do, just make up a flyer, which we had for the church. And he said, just go put them on doors. He said, don't go door to door talking to people, because I found around here, you knock on the door and people immediately don't want to talk to you. You make more enemies quick. But if you just go to door and you just put it on the door,
Yeah.
and so I made it my business every week to spend an hour or two, I just would walk down a street and just put flyers, one street, two streets.
Yes.
And it sounds crazy, but I found that when I was faithfully doing that, God would bring, rarely somebody from the flyer, but God would bring somebody in from some other place that would connect with us, just as I was faithfully doing that. And so I think God blesses the faithfulness,
Wow.
even if our methods are not the best,
Or direct.
And so
Wow.
I think that's an important piece of not losing sight of, we think, well, we have to preach the perfect sermon because, that's the only thing I have to do that, because that's what we're trained to do in seminary,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But you're preaching to the crowd who you care about and you love, who would probably be just as happy for you to sit down with the Bible and just talk to them.
I'm
And
evidence
so-
of that, man. It's true.
I think it's true. When I was at your church a few weeks ago, so your sermon was not long, but it was very effective. And we have this idea in our head of what a sermon has to be. And in this role as the catalyst in Connecticut, and so as I get to other churches and spend time, just listening to the messages, I'm finding a lot of pastors, planters, just want to just kind of pummel you with truth. And there's nothing wrong with that, I suppose. But I'm more moved when you've pastored me through a passage than when you've just pummeled me with a bunch of quotes and information and, scriptural
You've
verses.
passed me through a passage.
That's different. It's a different feeling. You walk away feeling like I just connected with something that was beyond me.
I'm going to steal that.
Yeah.
Growing up, we call that, in the black church, application preaching.
Yeah.
You've pastored me through a passage.
It's different. There's a connection that you make with people.
Yes.
And it isn't, you can do that whether you're preaching exegetically through a passage,
Yes.
or whether you're doing topics, whatever. You can do it in any way. But there's a difference. If you stop and talk to the congregation like you're having a cup of coffee with them, and I guess I always tried to do that, but I realized for a long time I would always preach my 3 points, right? Because everything complete comes in 3.
Yes. Yeah.
That's the way I was taught,
Yeah.
3 points. Everything is 3 points. And so at some point I realized when we reopened as a new church, I was just going to try to communicate a big idea. And if there are 3 points, fine. If there's not, it's okay.
Yes.
Because my thinking was if I can get you to walk away with one, because, you sit through the messages and people have quoted 20 different people and they've quoted passages all over the scripture and they've walked you through a passage and I don't remember most of it. You walk away thinking maybe like one thing will resonate.
Yeah.
But if you can communicate that one truth multiple times in different ways, it doesn't have to be 45 minutes long. It can be short, but it can be very effective. And I think that makes a big difference. And I think that's more what people want, because some people will binge watch Netflix. I've been thinking about this. But each show, because there's no commercials, so it's each, episode of half hour, like people love The Office. So they're watching The Office, and each episode is very short, so they can listen to it, do a break, and come back to it. You know what I mean? So it doesn't have to be long to be effective, and it doesn't have to be technical or even, perfect. But I think there's a pastoral piece to preaching that a young planter won't have for a while. So that's interesting. It's just a truth that I see as I go around.